Very warm welcome to all of you who are joining us today. It's wonderful to have you here once again on this platform, which is our 18th edition of the Southern Africa Trust Society Talks webinar series, which we launched back in April, early May, as a response to the problems, the developmental challenges that have been bedeviling our region in Southern Africa. And even though this platform was birthed during the COVID-19 pandemic, discussions had already been going on amongst different development partners, stakeholders, and actors in civil society and in the policy-making forum. And from our side at the Southern Africa Trust, together with our partners, many of whom I'm happy to say have joined us today, thought that it was important for us to adopt and shift as soon as possible to this new reality that has befallen us, so that we do not despair and give up on the important work of addressing the challenges of poverty, unemployment, inequalities within our countries and between our countries. And so we have continued, even though we have not been able to meet together, as we have often done, we have sought to shift to these virtual platforms as platforms for us to continue to be in solidarity with one another, to exchange ideas, and more importantly, together to bring our resources, our assets, and exchange information on how we can create the future that we truly desire, that we truly want for our organizations, our countries, our region, and our children as well. So today I have the utmost pleasure to have some of our very important leaders in civil society and social movements within the SADC region. And we're going for the next 1 hour to be in conversation with them. And I'm going to appeal to all of you who are watching to please feel free to share your insights, your ideas, and questions with them. And before I get to them as well, you might know that most Augusts, or around this time, August and September, is usually a festival of ideas and activism, where Southern Africa's social movements and civil society organizations gather in parallel to the official SADC Heads of State Summits and under the banners of the Civil Society Forum and the SADC People Summit, just to bring the citizens of our region to come and bring up their priorities and to map their way forward in solidarity on how our region should develop as we see fit. But because of the pandemic that has just brought out so much change, it was not possible for all of us to meet in Maputo. But here we are. Work did not stop. And today is a good opportunity to unpack what transpired on different virtual platforms, and also for the civil society leaders that are with us today to help us understand the impact and the meaning of the decisions that have been made by our leaders during the 40th SADC Summit and the platforms that are created by citizens. So I will ask our panelists to now introduce themselves and their organizations before we get into the content end of our edition today. We'll start with you, Sifiso.
Good day, everyone. My name is Sifisosami Dube. I'm the head of policy and movement building from Genderlinks, which is also the coordinator of the SADC Gender Protocol Alliance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sifiso. And then I will go to Janet.
Thank you, Marlon. My name is Janet Zhou. I work with the Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development. We are the host of the Permanent Secretariat of the Southern Africa People Solidarity Network.
Welcome, Janet. Thank you for joining us. And we'll go to Misheck.
Thank you very much, Marlon. My name is Misheck Gondo. I'm a team member of the Southern Africa Youth Forum, SADC. which works with young people across 16 SADC countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Misheck. And last but not least, Glenn.
Good afternoon, Marlon, the panelists, and all the participants. My name is Glenn Farad. I am the Executive Director of the SADC Council of Non-Governmental Organizations, which represents NGOs in the Southern African region.
Thank you, colleagues, for those brief introductions. I think I want to start with you, Glenn, the last person that spoke. As I mentioned in the introduction to this edition, is that civil society has been meeting mostly on the sidelines of the SADC heads of state. And for the first time ever, in my understanding, the Southern Africa Civil Society Forum took place as a virtual conference. And I just wanted you to unpack how that experience was for the SADC Council of NGOs. How was it for you as a leader, and what sort of challenges did you face in convening that space?
Thanks, Marlon. I think as the 16th edition of the Southern Africa Civil Society Forum unfolded, we had to firstly grapple with the reality of COVID-19 and its implications. So that was actually in itself a multifaceted challenge for all of us. I think the participants on this panel can attest to that. And as you alluded when you were introducing this very space, there were now many new ways of organizing which we had to adapt to in preparing for our normal traditional advocacy. But we also had to be mindful of the broader socioeconomic, political impact which COVID was having. And I think moving into a digital space presented challenges. So I think one of the challenges which this series has highlighted previously is the gap that arises with what we may call the digital democracy gap. And we noted in the preparation for the Civil Society Forum that our biggest strength as civil society, no matter which component of civil society we may be, is that we directly represent marginal constituencies or communities that are deliberately excluded from official decision-making processes, policy-making processes. And for that reason, the conditions of COVID, not simply as a public health pandemic, but also the conditions of lockdown, brought new and severe challenges, which disrupted our traditional modes of organizing. And I think that challenge is one that is ongoing. It hasn't gone away. In the actual preparation, therefore, we have to do much more, and I think much more differently in the sort of consultative processes that we would have to undertake. I think this is one that is going to be with us for a while. How does civil society, which relies on direct representation, on participation by communities, ensure that it does not become a movement of the digitized and that no one is actually left behind? So how do we ensure voice continues to be genuine and from the ground, and that we utilize these new spaces to amplify the demand for democratization across the digital sphere? So on the one hand, these are the challenges. Embedded in COVID, I think, were all the other socio-economic challenges which our countries face, and the governance systems problems that needed to be addressed. And I think as we discuss this further, we can explore how both COVID and lockdown has resulted in an unfortunate tendency on the part of some governments and certain forces in society to, in fact, crack down on democracy. On the whole, though, Marlon, to answer your question, I think that we can say that we hosted a digital space which brought a number of people in, which continued to give voice and which continued to connect. I think that the work going forward remains to ensure that the voice that we amplify is from the grassroots and is embedded in the people and communities that we serve.
Thank you very much, Glenn, for I think for sharing those insights, and we will come back to some of them, but very important to note from you on the key question of digital democracy, of the digital democracy gap, that as we have moved to this virtual ways of working, we have to be cautious that we do not leave the mass of our people and citizens behind and create a sort of elitist digital movement that does not include communities that are in the margins of policy making. So thank you for that, Glenn, and we will come back to that question to see exactly specifically what is the role of the Sadaq Council of NGOs in ensuring that that does not happen. I want to come to Janet now, just also, Janet, to hear from you, for those that may not be familiar with the Southern Africa People Solidarity Network and the Sadaq People Summit, to share and say what is the SAPSIN and what is the Sadaq People Summit, and what were the key issues that came out of the 2020 edition of the Sadaq People Summit.
Yes, thank you very much, Marlon. SAPSIN, or the Southern Africa People Solidarity Network, is a network of social movements, progressive groupings and popular groupings in the Sadaq region that are working on different issues. So we bring together, it's a membership network which brings together different social movements that are working on different issues, from climate justice, debt justice, democratization in the region, issues of the economy, looking at structural adjustment programs, for example, the issue of debt and trade that I've spoken about, and globalization as a whole, and where we position ourselves as a region. And on the democratization bit, it's really SAPSIN continues to probe and ask questions and to interrogate our independence, which for us, I think, has mainly been political independence, and we're still struggling and grappling with getting the economic independence. SAPSIN also is a network for solidarity, actually, for these movements that are in the region, and the community-based initiatives that are taking place in the region to challenge corporate power, to challenge access power by politicians, by multinational companies, by the military and the like. So as a network, we organize what we call the Sadaq People Summit, which is a parallel process which we have been hosting for quite a number of years now, parallel to the Sadaq Heads of State and Government Summit. So it is only there to signify that while the heads of state are meeting, the people also must have a platform and space for them to meet and discuss regional issues from their lived experiences, from their day-to-day challenges that they face, and inform the kind of development that they would want to see in the region. So it kind of dispels the state-centric SADC to shift that focus more to the people-centered SADC in terms of policies, in terms of spaces. And this year we did convene, and as Glenn has said, we normally do these summits back-to-back with the Sadaq Single Forum as well. But this year it had to be a virtual platform. We had to bring social movements together on virtual platforms. And it was such a new experience for us, because normally the summit is a festival. We call it the Festival of the Poor. They meet, they energize each other, they give each other solidarity. But in this case, they had to meet on the virtual platforms. And one of the big issues, I think, for us, beyond the democratization of technology, is the discomfort that we must always find in the privilege that we have, in terms of the technological privilege that we actually got to participate in the space, which we believe, in as much as many people participated in the space, it still left out a lot of people, not only for the lack of data, but SADC works with, like I say, these community-based initiatives. So some communities do not even have access. They don't even have electricity or energy for them to be able to connect. So connection was literally not there for them. So that is one big issue, I think, that really came out, that we must always be uncomfortable in this privilege that we have continued to enjoy as we adapted to the new ways of working with COVID-19 coming in. So we take note of that. And our theme was really on SADC at 40 towards a people-centered post-COVID future. So what we saw was that COVID, we can use, despite the pandemic having ravaged and caused a lot of havoc to our social and economic and even political lives because of the weaponization, the scandalization of this pandemic, we thought it could be an opportunity for the people of SADC to once again imagine a future that involves and includes the citizens of the region in framing and reimagining their role, reimagining their independence. So it focused on different thematic areas that ranged from small food producers. They met youth within the SADC membership, also had their own sessions. We had the health sector, we had the human rights and democracy, we had climate justice groupings and sessions. We had gender justice sessions within the summit, amongst many other. We hosted about 15 sessions at this year's summit. And I think on the issues, Marlon, that you have asked about, we produced quite a comprehensive declaration, which the local organizing committee in Mozambique has taken up, and they are the ones who are going to organize submission and engagement on it in Mozambique with the incoming SADC chair. But I would broadly put 4 issues on the table that came out from the summit. One is the issue of the growing poverty and inequality and the precarious conditions or livelihoods that actually COVID-19 brought. And we also noticed that our leadership seems not prepared and have a plan in terms of how to deal with the poverty and the inequality beyond the nominal commitments of, say, Abuja Declaration, Maputo Declaration, eThekwini Declaration, and the like. And there was a call around universal income grants, really, for us to address the big issues that we're facing there. But we also discussed the issue of the risk dip, for example, as an example, and how do we build and infuse people-centered policies that safeguard the environment, that safeguard livelihoods, that ensure that there is distribution of income equitably for the peoples of the region to benefit. The second issue was around the conflict and militarism in the region. I think this was a major issue in the democratic recession that we are in, is noted in northern Mozambique. We have a fragile situation in Lesotho, Swaziland, Zimbabwe, and the onslaught on human rights defenders was a key issue, and the militarization as well through the lockdowns that we have seen. I think this was a major issue that came out. The other issue was on the climate destabilization. I think this was a key issue that is posing a big threat to over 40 million citizens of this region in terms of starvation and hunger. And there was a call that we really need to look at this issue as a region, as the people of the region, and ensure that we do address this issue. I think COVID-19 really was discussed in detail, but seen, yes, is a major impediment in terms of progress, but also as an opportunity to rethink our development, because it exposed a lot of things in terms of where our priorities are, the underfunding of the public sector, the public health sector, the public education sector, our sanitation programs, despite the nominal commitments, for example, that I've spoken about, where the eThekwini Declaration talks about 0.5% of the GDP of SADC countries must be targeted towards sanitation. But millions of people in the region, they do not have access to water for them to wash their hands. It's the simple things that, for example, we have to do for us to be able to flatten the COVID-19 curve. So these are some of those issues that we're coming up, and I'm sure we'll continue to converse about them.
Thank you so much, Janet, for that. You've outlined in a great detail some of the issues that were being brought about by citizens from the SADC region, from different social movements and informal associations. And in the next chapter, I will ask you in 2 minutes, 3 minutes also to talk about the solutions that were coming out of the People's Summit. But thank you for painting that picture for all of us who were not able to join the SADC People's Summit. I wanted to take on one of the points that Janet has shared with us on gender justice and women's empowerment, and turn to Sifiso on this point. Sifiso, with your work with the Genderlinks and with the regional Alliance on gender justice and women's empowerment, I just want to check also on your reflections on what is the status of the women's movement in the SADC region at the moment. And looking at decisions that have been made in the just ended 40th Sadaq Summit, what are some of the decisions that you've particularly seen that advance the agenda for women's empowerment or actually impedes the momentum there?
Thank you, Marlon. This SADC forum, civil society forum, it was quite an opportunity preceding the SADC Heads of State Summit for us to highlight that the region is going backwards in terms of the gender equality gains, especially in the areas of health, sexual reproductive health and rights, as well as in the area of economic justice, as highlighted by Janet earlier. So in this, during the Civil Society Forum, we launched our Voice and Choice Barometer. Why we under Voice and Choice in times of COVID-19, because this barometer which we launched is a measurement of the gains and losses around the implementation of the SADC Protocol on Gender and Development, as well as other regional instruments. So what we have found out is that during COVID-19, of which is still an ongoing phenomenon, women's rights have been under a huge or massive threat because of the COVID-19 virus, as well as the issue of lack of leadership, lack of allocation of resources for women's rights, and diverting those resources under the pretense of COVID-19 for other things instead of the issues of gender equality advancement. We saw the suffering or the regression around sexual reproductive rights in the issues of maternal health because of COVID-19 restrictions or lockdowns, where women could not access antenatal care, issues around menstrual health, where women couldn't access or couldn't have funds even to women and girls to have funds around accessing sanitary products, issues around safe abortion, where those services were deemed non-essential as compared to COVID-19 patients, and the issues around women as frontline workers around the health sectors during times of COVID, and where in some hospitals, women were not given the personal protective equipment that they needed during caring for patients. We also saw during this period, and highlighted it in the barometer, that the care work of women, which is highlighted in many regional and global instruments, has doubled during COVID-19. And this exposes the lack of preparedness by governments or state institutions around the health sector. And as Janet has pointed out, only 2 SADC countries right now have met the Abuja Declaration of 15% allocation towards health, and that is only Eswatini and Madagascar. The rest, it shows the rot around the health hospitals. That's why you could see some scrambling around, pitching tents in stadiums and so on, trying to cover up for what they haven't really done over the years. So the states, the governments need to really up their game in terms of health expenditure allocation as compared to defense and security allocation. So those are the things that we want to highlight as women's rights movement, to say we cannot have any other disaster and see women suffering, or the gains that the region has made towards gender equality going backwards in terms of because of these allocations in terms of investment and finance. And then we could see the discrepancies in terms of geographic location, rural versus urban women, or rural versus urban girls, whereby most of these COVID-19 interventions were mainly centered in the urban centers, whilst the rural women and girls continue to suffer, because some woke up the next day and there were no buses going to the city. There were no buses, there was no water coming from the growth point to their specific locations. And those are the issues that when any government is dealing with disaster management, whether it's a natural disaster management or a health disaster management, we need a gender responsive strategy around any disaster management. It's the same issues that we have seen during Cyclone Idai, for example, where women's rights were really threatened during that cyclone, because there was no plan around gender responsiveness in terms of such disasters. So moving forward, we as the women's rights sector, we do encourage the governments to review any national policies or guidelines around disaster management to make sure that they are gender responsive, but also to reallocate budgets that were meant for sexual reproductive health and that were meant that were meant for defense back to the health sector, so that women's rights, women's sexual reproductive health and rights can be catered for. And then there's the issue of economic justice, that we saw a regression during this period. Most women who are mainly in the margins of the economy could not access income during COVID-19 lockdowns. So we saw that some governments tried to have stimulus packages or essential packages, food parcels, and so on. But we also saw the corruption, the rot that was exposed during the COVID-19 parcels scandals in many countries. So we need to correct that and make sure that women access such facilities equitably as men during such periods. But also in terms of those packages, looking what is in those essential food parcels, why didn't governments allocate, for example, sanitary products in those packages? Are they not essential things? Because women will not stop menstruating because of COVID-19. They will continue to menstruate. So those are the things that we need to allocate, to look at in terms of how we respond to situations as a nation or as a society. And also the other issue that we look at is the lack or the weakness of our social security systems in the region. I remember last year, the Commission on the Status of Women theme was around social security systems and infrastructure. Well, some countries do have social security systems, but you see the rot as well within those social security systems, where women are the least in terms of accessing the social security or those grants in terms of such crises or in terms of poverty situations. So we do encourage further advocacy, further lobbying in terms of improving the infrastructure around health systems, in terms of improving our own social security systems, as well as ensuring that the economic recovery considers women's rights and girls as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sifisosami, for that powerful presentation and insights on the key issues that the women's rights movement in the SADC region is advancing and promoting, but also the scandalous status that has been exposed by COVID-19. And as you mentioned that in your assessment, as the women's rights movement, is that the SADC region is sadly going backwards in terms of advancing the women's empowerment and gender justice agenda. You've also shared with us the importance of coming up with gender responsive disaster preparedness and response mechanisms. I think it would be interesting for our viewers as well to just get a little bit more sense from you on what those look like. What does a gender responsive strategy in a country in SADC look like in terms of disaster preparedness, and how can we prepare better to manage disasters, because that is something that is a given, that disasters will be with us for the long time to come. And the question is, how do we prepare, and what is it that we can practically do, not just governments, but also civil society organizations. I also want to invite those that are watching this edition across the various platforms to please also share your questions to our panelists and comments if you have any. You can either email to comms at southernafricatrust.org, which is COMMS at southernafricatrust.org, or you can put your questions on the chat boxes on the platforms that you're watching it on, whether it's on Facebook, Twitter, or the YouTube channel. So I want us to invite Misheck Gondo, who works with the SADC Youth Forum, and get from Misheck's perspective on the key issues, if there were any two burning issues that the young people of our region have been grappling with. What are those issues, and what was the prevailing sentiment coming out of the second SADC Youth Forum? What is it that the young people want to see, and what is it that the young people are committed themselves to do in terms of advancing development in our region? Misheck.
Okay, thank you very much, Marlon, for the time to present representing SIOF. It is important to note that the second SADC Youth Forum, also like any other forum, was held virtually this year, and there was a resounding participation. Just mentioning that that is very important to know. What was unique about this year's forum is the involvement of young people in planning committees. There was a call for participation, and about 114 young people were selected out of 5,262 applicants to lead the different thematic committees. So we had about 10 thematic committees that were under discussions led by these young people. And out of this thematic committee, for this year, the forum was a 3-day forum. As you also know that the forum runs under the Sadaq CNGO, Civil Society Forum annual gathering in the regional. So we took advantage for this year's virtual coronavirus, and we met virtually. And the first day started with the youth parliament. And the youth parliament was attended by all 16 countries. And it is important to take into account that the discussion for this year was looking at debt. As you know, that most SADC countries are affected by the debt burden. And there were quite solutions that came from young people as recommendations. And what is also important for this forum, Marlon, to take into account is we used what we call the youth development model, which involves the stakeholder analysis, whereby we don't want to target those that are involved later after we come with a declaration. So we planned with the people that we are targeting. This year's forum involved ministries of youths, youth councils, and also SADC Secretariat. I can openly say that we started to plan to have meetings with SADC Secretariat way back before the summit, and even they gave the official remarks, also taking into account they attended the parliament, And at the last event, also Dr. Parakokwa attended representing Dr. Tex. We also had direct conversation with Dr. Tex herself. The reason why we use the youth development model, we are sectoralizing to say our issues, we want to target the governments, we want to target SADC as a body, we want to target the youth councils, we want to target the communities. So everyone was involved. We also helped some young people from marginalized communities through bundles so that they will come up and participate. So just quickly to highlight some of the discussions that were done out of this committee. Some of these committees, just to highlight, we had Disability Committee, we had Gender Justice and Young Women's Rights, Peace and Security, Governance and Political Inclusion, Climate Change and Environment, Education, Science and Technology, Health and COVID-19, business and entrepreneurship, media and communication. Then lastly, like what I said, there was youth parliament. But what was also unique for this year is the discussions around Pan-Africanism and heritage as an appreciation. So out of the discussions that had happened from these young people, it is important to note that there's a declaration that came out of the summit, and part of the declaration was presented on the closing ceremony where different stakeholders were. We're also working with Africa Union Youth Division and Africa Union Office of the Youth Envoy with regard to other cases that needs regional solutions. So there are various issues that came out, but quite critical is the realization of people emanating from what emanated from 2015 when SADC adopted the SADC Declaration on Youth Empowerment and Development as a high-level commitment to address youth issues with renewed determination to implement issues that affect young people with regard to employment, with regard to political inclusion, with regard to exclusion and other things. So we had taken into account that SADC had already come with a declaration. But what young people now working with SADC is to come with SADC Youth Protocol. And I can tell you that, as I've alluded to, that through the SIOF structures, we are working with the SADC Secretariat, and in March, there might be a meeting for Youth Council of Ministers, and we are part of that already in terms of preparing for that to present the issues that have come from SADC Youth Forum, among other, and also other issues that came. The second issue that came, so that I conclude on the resolutions, is an acknowledgement of the challenges that young people are facing in the time of COVID. So there's need of a post-COVID strategy to make sure that young people have resources, also are included in terms of employment, are included in terms of mental health, are also included in terms of decision-making, even in terms of peace and security as part of this. And also what you need to take into account, Marlon, is through the youth development model I mentioned, we are going to have meetings. And we are also going to reach to you as our partner, ASAT. We are going to have different meetings that we are going to organize to have what we call listening forums. So listening forums, we are going to have a listening forum for regional civil society on the outcomes of the SADC Youth Forum declaration. So this is just targeted to those, so that we discuss. So these are the committee chairs for different thematic areas. They'll be presenting in summary of what had come out of the SADC Youth Forum. And we are going to meet with Africa Union, SADC, we're working with them, but we are going to have a special session with also youth councils, with development partners. The reason is to make sure that youth issues in the region are not only taken. We don't want the issues of doing a forum, then after the forum we produce a declaration. Next year we are meeting again, produce another declaration. So we are going to have a hands-on approach. Already, let me mention that, as you might know, that in our 2 years of existence as SIOF, we are the youth representative in the United Nations major group, representing Africa, and also representative of SADC in the Africa Union Youth Front on Coronavirus, led by the Office of Youth Envoy and the Youth Division. So some of these issues that have come, we're already starting to implement them. Like last week, we had the silencing the guns regional consultation, where SIOF Kofi Annan Foundation and Accord were leading in terms of what comes from the declaration, what can be done in terms of this. So this hands-on approach, that's what young people are eager to say. We need to do it differently. Yes, we need to take advantage of technology. We want to work with partners. We want to make sure that issues are solved. So lastly, Marlon, there were various issues that come out of the declarations, and I cannot preempt them. Listening forums are coming that we want to partner with a different partner, but also for this year, we worked with various partners. As I've said, we worked with Sadaq Single. This program, Sadaq Youth Forum, is under the Sadaq Single annual event. We had GIZ, we had Action Aid, we had SACON, with Africa Union, we had Sadaq, we had with University, as also complementing the youth work. So we appreciate such kind of young people. Also, because the issue of resources towards youths were raised, to say there are limited resources that are directly linked to young people with various thematic areas, be it health, peace, security, gender justice, among other issues. Thank you, Marlon.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Misheck, for sharing that. I mean, it's very encouraging, and congratulations on holding successfully this second Sadaq Youth Forum. The youth development model that you've shared with us, and also the commitment of young people to do things differently and to have a more hands-on approach. So thank you for that. I mean, time is the only enemy. I wish we could also delve deeper into some of those things, but I think in the next round of questions, I also would like to hear your view on the coordination amongst youth organizations in the region, and just as the status of youth organizations. Are they well coordinated, and the quality of youth activism? Are those that say that we don't have youth activists in the Sadaq region correct? That would be really good to hear from you and what you observed from the youth parliament. Quickly to move on as well to Glenn. I think there's been the 16th Southern Africa Civil Society Forum. And I think all the panelists have mentioned one word in common, which is declaration. And I want to hear this, because this is something that the question that is posed many a times, to say, what really is the value of declarations? Our colleague Janet spoke about, on the government side, that we have a eThekwini declaration, with Abuja declaration. Our region and continent is not short of protocols and declarations. But this is not something associated with governments only. Civil society has been issuing outcome statements and declarations since we ourselves were children and until we joined the sector. And so I just want to hear from you, as one of our leaders in civil society, your own reflections about the utility of declarations. What utility are they? And so what has been the difference from the first Southern Africa Civil Society Forum to the 16th? Are we seeing any movement? Why do we do these declarations, and what is their impact?
Marlon, I think there are two parts to the answer to your question. One is that all the spaces that we convene strengthen us collectively as civil society. And if you look at your panelists here, each of these organizations have contributed to each other in different ways and at different times. So we have built the strength and the capacity of civil society to give voice to constituencies. Last year, we had the first youth forum for SADC. And this year, we can see the enormous progress that youth have made in their self-organization and self-articulation and capacity, both on the ground and through the policy-making process, to impact and be heard. So that's the first value that these spaces bring. Our colleagues from the Gender Protocol Alliance in SADC, as convened by Genderlinks, are a critical component in reinforcing the victories that we have in the region with respect to gender justice. And they are continuously pushing the frontiers, or where necessary, fighting the rearguard battles to avoid further erosion. I would go further, but I think those two examples are sufficient. And maybe it's important to say this, that organizations like society are not static. Different interest groups emerge at different points with different needs. Or more specifically, as we have seen with COVID, how those needs are expressed and how they get prioritized need to shift under changing conditions. COVID has posed new and difficult challenges for social protection, for informal workers, for small-scale farmers, producers, traders. It's posed new and difficult challenges for our education system. So all the work that we've done needs to be consolidated once more. But I think, to your question, have we impacted sufficiently? We have to ask ourselves that question. And when we convened the 16th Civil Society Forum, the core question was partially about our member states and SADC as an institution, but it was centrally self-directed. We have to say to ourselves, can our churches stand up and claim moral voice in society when in their own congregations they may be reinforcing behaviors and attitudes that discriminate against part of the congregations, part of the communities? Can our trade unions claim voice as champions for workers' rights and for the downtrodden when they are not seen to be part of a broader social re-engineering that brings young people into the labor market, that reshapes how our economies are structured? Can NGOs claim to be effective watchdogs when there are challenges about the efficacy of the work we do and the ethics that we live? So how do we, as civil society, first and foremost, role model our conduct to be consistent with our values, to be agents of change? We convened as the 16th Civil Society Forum, not so much to say this is what member states must do, this is what governments must do, but rather to say, how do we better shape and act in a way that impacts on decision-making and policy-making in a meaningful way? So there are two parts to that. One is we must understand the space that we are operating in better. We must prepare and share knowledge with everyone more widely so that we open the space from indigenous people to women to young people. All of these are needed. So we need to broaden the space. We need to bring more and more people into the fold of change. And we need to connect between ourselves to strengthen the spirit of solidarity and common action. So on the one hand, that means becoming more skilled at understanding how SADC as an institution works, how our member states configure this institution, and how this institution is trying to evolve. We spoke about, I think, even SADC, glibly, about 40 years. Marlon, I know you've got time constraints, so I'm just going to mention this point quite briefly to say, as the Civil Society Forum, we recognize that this 40 years needs interrogation. It needs critical reflection. We need to understand why SADC did more in its first 10 years when it was SADC with 2 Cs, the coordinating conference. Then once it became a fully fledged international intergovernmental institution established by international law, that is the SADC Treaty. So for 30 years, for a generation, SADC has been less effective than it was in the first 10 years. Understanding that means that we need to go to the heart of what this community is, where it comes from, what values underpin it, and what our role as citizens are in ensuring that it gives effective voice to what our needs are. And I think in that regard, from the point of view of the forum, what we have highlighted is the need to map the space, to share the space, to democratize the space, and that means going deeper with all our partners and the constituent organizations in preparing them and equipping them to have strategic and tactical approaches to place their issues on the agenda. And that's an exercise that we know all our partners here will be participating in, from the children's sector through indigenous people, women, the trade unions, the faith-based organizations, and so on. And that is about giving people the tools to actually access and make impact. So the more of that we can have, the better, and to do so in a cohesive and clear way through the SADC proposed non-state actor mechanism is a key step forward. But that doesn't guarantee us victory. It simply assures us of a terrain of struggle. So the internal reflection for us goes much deeper. It goes and says, the SADC Treaty, when it was adopted by the heads of state in 1992, in its preamble, it locates itself, amongst other things, in the Lagos Plan of Action of the Organization of African Unity. This is back in 1980. So it makes reference to itself overall in relation to Africa's renewal. Now, this is the task that is before us once again. And for the Civil Society Forum, the key task now is to say, what does Africa's renewal look like today under these conditions? How do we draw the balance sheet? And what prognosis do we make for our future? And what role do we define for ourselves with ethical leadership, with ethical practices, and with accountability and transparency at our core? The governance challenges within our region remain significant, and they will be overcome through this kind of mobilization around a central, cohesive strategy that can impact for all of us. So while we want to say we must give voice to all constituencies, there's also the need to consolidate a central new development paradigm. And that paradigm needs to be focused on well-being and wellness for all our people. And it needs to go to the heart of the political economy in our region. So we need to start talking seriously about two things in conclusion.
Thanks.
One is agrarian reform. Our region, our countries, our societies must be able to feed itself. Yeah, and that is a whole process that looks at undoing structural inequalities that we have suffered. The second component is to rein in and redefine our relationship to the extractive industries so that we can focus on our capacity to build new value chains, to have value addition within our societies and between our societies. So we echo the founding fathers of SADC from the 40th anniversary in saying, now is the time for economic liberation, which is met and matched by democratic governance and inclusion for all.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Glenn. And I'm so glad that you then preempted the question that I would have had about the importance of recognizing the log in civil society's eye, to say, as much as civil society historically has been demanding greater transparency and action from government, what is it that civil society on its own is committing to do, and not only committing to do, but is actually doing. So I'm glad to hear that as part of the outcomes of the 16th Civil Society Forum is a commitment from civil society in the SADC region itself to work on greater ethical leadership, greater transparency, and to be part of the solutions to the problems that the region is facing, and to go beyond the culture of declarations and communicates. And I'm glad that you also mentioned the collective strength that comes from the organizations that are represented here and do so much work across the region. I would like to come to Janet, and as well as we say that perhaps in the next chapter we can talk about this new development paradigm. And Janet, because you work on economic justice issues as well, yes, is to say if there's maybe a couple of points in 2 minutes. Yes. How would you create this new economy what would be the key principles on which a new development paradigm must be based on, if you were leading SADC?
Yes, sure. So the discussions, like I said, it's about reimagining the role of the citizens in the SADC region. I think the region has really gone on a neoliberal agenda. So most of our economies, including our SADC reindustrialization policy, our RISDIP, talks really about promoting the big businesses, the multinational companies, for example. So looking and reimagining a new economy, I think for SADC, from the discussions that we had, it's really to locate the people that have sustained this economy anyway. So these are the women in the unpaid care work, like Sifiso has said. These are the informal traders that are in the different countries. The cross-border traders who have not been operating actually because of COVID-19. And the challenges that they have faced, and those that are in the different precarious livelihood situations that we are in. Sex workers, for example, all these people, they haven't been able to carry on their trade because of the challenges that we're facing. So we need to reimagine the role of the citizen, the role of the SADC people in the economy. When we were talking, I wanted to also address the fact that we continue meeting, yes, as a people, and Glenn said it right, that we're not only meeting to give the demands and to come up with declarations, but it's also about what do we do to get out of the situations that we are in, to get out of the problems that we are currently facing, to challenge the debt injustices, to challenge the trade injustices, the inequalities, the poverty, extractivism, militarization, and the gender injustices that we continue to face. And I would want to say that there's not going to be some elevator solutions to this. We have to take the stairs, but we have to be doing something. And we have to start celebrating those brave community-based initiatives that social movements, that grouping, that individuals, human rights defenders have started to take. I think those are there in their many. Talk of Wange community refusing for the Chinese company to mine in a national park. There are different examples of how people, community initiatives are resisting injustices. So just as I conclude, I think we have seen that the region has also come up with quite a number of stimulus packages to address the COVID pandemic impact, socioeconomic impacts, including the health crisis. But we have to interrogate those then and see how are they emancipating and responding to the challenges that are faced by people on the ground, and how are they going to be funded so that we don't perpetuate the issue of conditionalities, the issue of austerity, corruption that has been spoken about. We have to question the distribution politics of our country. How are we distributing wealth to different groupings? So as SABCIN, we've done an open letter to the SADC heads of state after the People's Summit. We've done an open letter that addresses the different issues that we have highlighted in the declaration, and we hope to take that up, that open letter, and look for the response in terms of issues that we have raised. We have engaged with the Sadaq CNGO, Glenn, and other partners around a convergence platform where we can bring all these issues together. I know before the summits, we actually had an engagement where we were talking about some of these issues. And I think this is important to bring all these initiatives at some point where we converge and make our demands ahead and come up with one voice. Just to respond as well and to be relevant to the situations on the ground, we are supporting the different groups that are in precarious livelihoods right now, like I said, the sex workers, the small food producers, the cross-border traders associations, with some bit of cash transfers for them to be able to bounce back in the economy as the lockdowns continue to ease. So we have a little cash transfer, and we want to use this as an example in terms of how the politics of distribution our government can actually transform and use that to really impact and give people dignified livelihoods and for them to be able to participate in the economy. So we have a small cash transfer program that we're doing with identified groups that we think were mostly affected. To also carry on with the conversations beyond the summit, from the 1st of October, we'll be having people's assemblies. The people's assemblies are now refining action plans for the different sessions, and also pushing for different campaigns. So the people's assemblies are going to, some of them are going to actually be in person, because they'll be at the community level where people can really talk up and have critical thinking around the issues that are affecting them. And we have a campaign that will run around the food justice and hunger in the region, looking at 40 million people affected by this. So that's a big campaign that we are going to run with within the people's assemblies, of course, and the other issues that they are working with. So it's going to be engagement, but it's not only engagement, but also resistance to injustices. I think we need to continue to build on that. So that is not only resilience, where we are saying people must be resilient or people are resilient, but they must be able to resist injustices as well. Because I think it is time to build on from being victims that we continue to project. I think they're brave acts that citizens have done, and that we can actually amplify and share within the region to reboot each other, to re-energize each other, and to make things back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janet. I just also want to come back to you for just 1 minute more on the important aspect you have shared about the rollout of the program of action. Now that Sadaq People's Summit has been done, and the People's Assemblies are taking the agenda now and working on the declaration that were made. How easy are you finding it to do programming work in the context of lockdowns? And what are your reflections on how much more can we carry on in this new normal? Do you think this is something that's sustainable, or we are going to lose a lot of momentum in this?
I think because the people's assemblies are more smaller, and they're really for critical thinking within the sessions, they're going to be possible, and they're at the national levels. So each country will be doing their people's assembly on the identified issues within the declaration. So they are smaller, and we're hoping that these are going to be manageable in terms of rolling out. But we are also cognizant of the fact that, of course, lockdowns continue. But in most also SADC countries, there have been some easing in terms of the lockdown conditions. So we can have like 50 people actually gather and meet in a place and observe the different World Health Organization guidelines. So we are hoping to have a mix of both virtual people's assemblies and also the in-person people's assemblies, where that is possible, just to augment and ensure that we reach out. But also there's the issue of the use of the media. I think we're going really big on the use of media and partnerships with the media. We have, for example, reached out to Mail and Guardian, which we believe is read by quite a number of the SADC leadership and those in different places. And we're going to be partnering in terms of the information that we want to bring out. For example, the open letter, they've taken that up, and we should be seeing that. So partnerships as well with the media and popularizing the people's assemblies using media is going to be one of the key strategies that we're going to use to kind of try and plug some of the gaps that we may realize because of the lockdown conditions. It also comes with the fact that some of the SADC countries are actually going to go for elections, and for countries like Zimbabwe, despite the fact that elections are in 2023, there's already an election mode kind of vibe. So penetration as well into communities may be a bit difficult. So we're trying to use the media as a partner to bring out and to popularize the people's assembly issues as well. Yes.
Thank you, Janet, for that. I had requested for additional time because I was also drowning in the conversation. Generally to the other panelists as well, was supposed to end at 5, but I'd requested for 10 additional minutes. So I want us to come to a conclusion, sadly, of this fascinating conversation today. And I want to start or go next to Sifiso, and then just ask Sifiso on generally 2 questions from your side. One is civil society still relevant in this new normal, in this new context, and that includes women's rights movement? Are they still relevant? And if you have an opportunity to put one agenda item on the next Sadaq Summit, what would that be?
Thanks, Marlon, for that sharp question. Of course, civil society is part of a vibrant democracy. It is still relevant. We continue to be the watchdogs. We continue to hold governments accountable on their commitments, on the social contract that they signed with the citizens of Sadaq. We, as the women's rights movement, we continue to hold governments accountable on gender equality commitments that they have met, but also encouraging them to learn from each other in terms of best practices, to domesticate whatever they have signed at a regional level. In terms of what I would say, in terms of the takeaways from the Sadaq Summit, I think it is critical for reflection to say the Sadaq region actually has done so much well in terms of gender equality. How can we lose the gains because of COVID-19? So we need to reflect as a region to say, what have we done wrong and how can we correct this mistake moving forward? And what can we, what transformative leadership can we take to other regions, to the entire continent, and at a global level as well? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sifiso, for the equally sharp responses to that. I think those points are well taken, and we will continue the conversation even beyond this edition of Society Talks. So I want to come to Misheck. Also, similarly on these questions, Misheck, do you still see civil society as being relevant in this new future? I know at SIOF, you rally behind the motto, dare to shape the future. I hope I got that correct. Is civil society really relevant for this future? Is it daring to shape the future? And if you have one agenda item to talk to Dr. Tax now to say this, the next Sadaq Summit must really be engaging with this issue, what would it be?
Thank you very much. Definitely, have you also seen in the different, currently the constitutions that are being made in different countries from in Africa, you are realizing that there's inclusion of the role of civic society in these constitutions, even at international instruments. There's no doubt about it that the civic society, the role for them to complement the government. It is in rare cases where the civic society go at loggerheads with the government, where the governments maybe might be violating human rights and maybe undermining people's dignity. But the actual role should actually complementing the developmental aspect of the people. And on the point of the young people, I think those were part of us other discussions. Really, there is an issue of inclusion in different issues that affect young people. Inclusion in political participation, in economic participation. There's need of a framework whereby even the SADC country, they need to make sure that young people are part of decision making. Going back to the youth development model, we say young people are stakeholders, are stockholders, and are also change makers. And also there are 7 Ps that talks about their inclusion as primacy. But they are not only the players. They have to complement other players that are there. So civil society plays a key role as any other player that is pro-developmental.
Thank you very much. That's powerful as well. Misheck, on the relevance of civil society, but also the youth sector as part of that greater platform. Glenn, I want to end with you. You have the benefit of the last 2 minutes as well. I think part of it is as part of the leadership of the Southern Africa Civil Society movement. What can you do better moving forward? What are the lessons that you have learned from our past mistakes? How can we show up better as a sector? How can we respond better to the aspirations of our people and our citizens? How can we align better with the people and the pains of our people? And what one agenda item, if you were speaking to Dr. Tex right now, would you ask her to put on the next Sadaq Summit?
Marlon, to answer your question, I think as
all our colleagues have said, I think, yes, we've made mistakes, but I think the one thing I want us to remember, and this was raised in the Civil Society Forum, is we've also got to learn to celebrate our victories and acknowledge the enormous contributions that we have made. And a lot of this institutional memory has been lost. And I think part of the outcomes from the Civil Society Forum was to begin to develop an oral history project that begins to reconstruct the depth, the richness, the diversity, the skills, the tactics, the programmatic insights, and organizing methodologies that we have pioneered. So speaking, I think, for everybody on this panel, we are very aware of our shortcomings and weaknesses. What we don't do, and we don't take enough time to do, is celebrate our enormous victories against the odds. And so that's a thank you to Southern Africa Trust and to all the partners here and to all the organizations behind the partners who work so tirelessly under such difficult conditions. So I think that's just one thing I want to say about reflections about our strengths and weaknesses. In respect of our last engagement with Dr. Tax, I think we put this on the table. And it was to say that it is high time that the SADC Secretariat interrogates its role, its efficacy, its mandate, its status, legal status, its functional and operational capacity to become fit for purpose in the 21st century. This is a non-negotiable, I think, if we are future-proofing ourselves and if we are to learn anything from these 40 years of SADC. This SADC belongs to all of us, and we don't have to make that case anymore. What we are asking for is for the reform of SADC and the cogent, coherent, and integrated reorganization of SADC via an amended treaty that elevates the Secretariat to a regional authority so that it has the full capacity to conduct its mandate. And this being a necessary exercise, we believe, to ensure the full balancing of participation by non-state actors, the efficacy of program planning and implementation and the monitoring thereof, but also the balancing of sovereignty with subsidiarity, and the necessary evolution of SADC into this century where we are now. This is no longer a debate that we can postpone. We believe that ironing out these key foundational principles of SADC through elevating the SADC Parliamentary Forum into a parliament, the reinstitution of the Court of the Tribunal, the SADC Tribunal as a regional court of justice, and this reorganization of SADC as a regional authority properly constituted by treaty, including an effective non-state actor mechanism, will be the key cornerstone on which we can build SADC for the next 40 years.
Thank you so much. If we were in church, this would be the time to say, and the people say, amen. So I really want to take this opportunity to thank, first of all the listeners who managed to join into this conversation this afternoon, this morning, depending on where you are located. And secondly, I just want to salute all of you for the great work that you do, to salute you, Sifiso, for the work that you're doing at Genderlinks together with the women's rights movement partners across the Sadaq region. To also salute you, Janet, with the work that you're doing with the ZIMCODD and the members of the Southern Africa People Solidarity Network. And also to salute you, Misheck, for the great, fantastic work you've done in the last 2 years with the Southern Africa Youth Forum, coordinating and bringing the voice of our young people into the center of development and policy making in the SADC region. And last but not least, to salute you, Glenn Farid, Executive Director of SADC Council of NGOs as well, for the fantastic work that you continue to do to bring spaces, voices, solidarity, and agency to the non-governmental organizations across the length and breadth of the SADC region, despite the challenges that we face, despite the shortcomings in resourcing, that we continue to move ahead and advance the aspirations of our people. As Janet said, we must continue to feel unease and guilt with the privileges that we get in life, and that should motivate us to continue to struggle for greater equality within our communities and amongst our countries in the SADC region. So thank you again. This has been a fantastic 18th edition of the Society Talks edition, and we would invite you to continue discussing, and hopefully we can come back again with this very panel to continue to unpack this greater future that we want to see for our SADC. Thank you and goodbye.